Happy early morning Tuesday to, of course, Bakari. He's joining us today for our 1 month NBA All-Star ballots. These are guys that not necessarily, they might not make it at the midseason mark due to team success or if they get injured, whatever the case may be. So we're going to be looking through the first 12 to 15 games of each team and the players and their performances and showing them their flowers. But like I mentioned, Bakari, you're joining us today. How you doing on this early morning Tuesday?
Yeah, I feel good. Excited to be on this pod. As many of you OG fans know about our All-Star drafting last year, when of course the draft was still in question. There was a lot of fun and excitement about that. So anytime we're talking about NBA All-Star, it's a fun thing to do.
I definitely lost that draft, and if you remember, it's because I wanted to show some love to Laurie Markkinen, and I ended up selling my entire draft. So that's one I definitely will admit. Bakari got the upper hand. Regardless, we're going to start here very simply in the backcourt in the Eastern Conference. I am going to show some love to a guy that, to me, is the lock in the Eastern Conference for the point guard position. It is Tyrese Haliburton. Before the season, all the power rankings videos I did, I guess raved about this team and of course Tyrese Haliburton, and I said they were going to be legit. Truth behold, they are. 1 week into the or a couple weeks into the NBA season, but Tyrese Haliburton, I mean, he's averaging like 25 and 12, leading this Pacers team, number one offense. They're number one in assists as well. He's just the catalyst of this offense, and I get it. I guess I'll get your opinion on it. Of course, also we have Donovan Mitchell. He's dealing with a hamstring. We'll talk about them in depth later, but he's also averaging like 29, 4 and 4. Tyrese Haliburton, though, to me, reminds me, or I guess I'll say this: that Pacers offense reminds me of like the 7 seconds or less Suns offense. So I guess what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, one thing about Tyrese Haliburton and when I watch the Pacers is his assists are very natural. You get a lot of guys who average a lot of assists and they average a high amount of turnovers, and you can tell they're kind of forcing the issue. Like I remember when Russ was averaging those triple doubles, it was he's stat padding, he's throwing the ball right to somebody when there's no time left on the shot clock, so they have to shoot it.
Hockey assist.
Things of that nature. But when Tyrese Haliburton and these Pacers play, it's all free flowing. He's kind of playing the game naturally and only has about 10 points. And then next thing you know, he has 13 assists to go with that. And you're kind of like, well, where did these assists come from? Another thing about that Pacers team is I underestimated how dangerous they could be because they don't have one go-to guy like obviously
Right.
Tyrese Haliburton, but he's there to set up the offense and he get his points later in the game. It's really dangerous because you got guys like Aaron Naismith, Buddy Hield, Miles Turner, all guys who can go and get you 20 plus points. And obviously with a record at 7-5, they've come out the gate swinging this year.
Yeah, I mean Tyrese Haliburton. To me, I worry about this team come playoff time. I talked about it a week ago on Tuesday's video. I have them as pretenders as far as competing for a championship, but I think they can also be a fun regular season team. I wasted enough time. Let's talk about your starters. Who are your starting backcourt here in the Eastern Conference?
Given the recent success of these two guys, Tyrese and Donovan Mitchell, it's kind of hard to argue. Just like you said, it's kind of hard to argue like any other different variation of a starting backcourt in the East. We talked about Tyrese averaging about 25 and 12 or 25 and 13 in that crazy span he went on with no turnovers and all those assists. But Donovan Mitchell, this is somebody who's continued his hot streak from last year. And, for the first few games of the season, it felt like he was the only one on this Cleveland team who was trying to play winning basketball. And as a Cleveland fan, it hurt because the better D Mitch plays and the worse the team performs, you could tell he's going to be out of here very soon. But like you mentioned, he was averaging about 30, 4 and 4, dealing with the hamstring injury now. But Donovan Mitchell is a real hooper. Good thing about the Cavs though, they're back on a little winning streak, so they're only like a game behind the Pacers. So
As Cavs fans, we kind of hope that he is in the uniform more than just this season, especially as the young core continues to develop. But definitely this time that he's out, we need to have our young core step up and be, the players that we know they can be. Speaking of Evan Mobley. But moving over to the front court, my front court, of course, we're going to have Joel Embiid. No other center or front court player can be here aside from Joel Embiid. And then Jason Tatum, MVP level season. Giannis, same thing. I don't think there's really going to be a question about who is the starting front court in the Eastern Conference for the next 3 years. It's going to be these three guys unless LeBron returns to the Eastern Conference. So to me, Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum, Giannis, all three leaders, all three playing at an MVP level. Do you have any differences there?
No, I don't. My front court is the exact same. Like you said, these three guys are, it's almost like how LeBron is every year. They're locks to start in the All-Star game, as long as they're dominant. Obviously, we know about Jason Tatum's recent 45 and 13 game, but even Giannis adjusting to a new superstar teammate and Damian Lillard, he's still playing. As we know, Giannis will play, and Joel Embiid taking on a little bit more of a playmaking role for this Philly offense, and the emergence of Tyrese Maxey has really helped him out as well. And Joel Embiid is, playing like a number two center in the league right
Playing
now.
like a top two player at the moment. Of course, that's just the Sixers have been amazing. It's a good way to put it to start the year. Number two in the Eastern Conference. To me, I thought they were going to fall off a little bit as far as regular season success, and then maybe turn it on and come playoff time. But they're already in second half mode. I mean, I talked about it last week. I don't know if it's still the same, but Tyrese Maxey was top three in MVP voting to start the season, as well as Joel Embiid. So the Sixers have been off to an amazing start, and you touched on the rest of the points. It's kind of crazy that we're not even talking about Giannis because he's just that good, and he's even taking a step back. And of course, we have our questions about Jason Tatum, but he is also playing at an amazing level. Number one team in the NBA. Starting off on the bench, I'll let you read off your backcourt and your slash wing, so your guard slash wings off the bench.
Yeah, so my guards and wing off the bench are Trae Young. I know that comes as a surprise to a lot of people who've been watching this. Tyrese Maxey, LaMelo Ball, and Jimmy Butler. These are, my first few guys off the bench. Trae Young, despite I think the Hawks are, what are they, 500 or a game under 500?
They're just about there, yeah.
Yeah, they're one of those two, and every year it feels like it's Trae Young does his job. His turnover and his efficiency still could be higher, but he's always one or two in assists. He does a lot of playmaking, a lot of the heavy lifting for that Hawks team, and it just seems like the guys around him, other than like DeJounte Murray, just usually don't step up as much as they should. Tyrese Maxey, like we just talked about, Tyrese Maxey, this is somebody who you could have argued could have, started in the front court.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, in the back court for the East, because he's been playing at such a tremendous level. Obviously, he's picked up that James Harden role from last year and took it a step further, especially with the scoring. This is what we like to see from Tyrese Maxey. LaMelo Ball, this is somebody who started off the season, still trying to get his footing under him from last year. Obviously,
Quite literally.
we know about the injuries, but he's really stepped it up as of late. And Jimmy Butler, he's on the team where if you look at the stats, they have three guys who could be in the All-Star game.
Right.
Jimmy Butler, he is that emotional and vocal leader on this team, and he is deserving of that spot.
I still can't get over that picture of Jimmy Butler, but I guess every single year we're just going to get a crazy media day photo of Jimmy Butler. But as you guys saw when I opened up the podcast, we have had, I think this is episode 114 of the Tuesday and Thursday show. And Bakar, you've been on 50 plus shows. Okay. Well, let's say that. And I've never heard you praise Trae Young in any form or way. And this is the first time that's ever happened. So when you sent me over your submissions, I was surprised to say the least. But my backcourt and wings, we only have three. So I have a little bit more play in the front court. But we have Jalen Brunson, the guy who's just player of the week, and he's the only steady, I guess, good part of this Knicks team. I guess Julius Randle has his moments where he's actually kind of played decent since that late game, I guess, fumble by that Knicks offense. But Jalen Brunson's been the only steady piece in this offense, and he's been good. He's been very underrated like he always is. You talked about Tyrese Maxey and Jimmy Butler. For Jimmy Butler and the Heat, it's surprising that this team is playing so good. I mean, the history tells us after LeBron and D Wade left, this is a team that has just been a steady regular season team. They're going to hover around that 500, that 4 to 8 seed, and then they're just going to turn it on with about 10 games left in the regular season into the playoff run. But this year it seems different. Tyler Hero has taken those trade rumors to heart, and like you mentioned, they have three all-star caliber players, one in which we'll talk about now, as on your bench you have a teammate of Jimmy Butler, but also touch on the other two guys you have in your front court.
Yeah, Bam Adebayo. This is somebody who's always, top three in the defensive player of the year votings when he's healthy. This is somebody who's always a defensive, all first team defensive player. This is somebody who means a lot to the Heat team, as well as Jimmy and as well as Tyler Hero. He's a playmaking center. He does a lot to set the offense up from that high to low post area. This is somebody who has a really good face-up game, and like I mentioned, he has phenomenal defense in positions 1 through 5. Kristaps Porzingis. This one is a welcome sight for Boston fans. This is somebody who they came in and be their fourth star,
Yeah,
third star,
yeah.
and he's excelling at the role. There's been really little to no feeling out process between for Kristaps and fitting in and knowing his role. Obviously the season's still early, but this Boston team looks like probably the most complete team in basketball right now. And Scotty Barnes, this is somebody who a couple of years ago when he won Rookie of the Year, there was a little bit of outrage, especially because you had a player in Evan Mobley who was
Was
putting
on a
up
winning team.
the same stats on and had a bigger impact on his team. We obviously know about the severe shooting sophomore slump for Scotty Barnes. But this year, he's really bounced back. The Raptors let Nick Nurse go, and I feel like it was a little bit more beneficial for Scotty Barnes as he's been able to take more control of this team. And his stats are really reflective of that.
Yeah, I think this is the sophomore year that we wanted to see from Scotty
Yeah,
Barnes. And that is also why he is an all-star for me as well. You touched on it there, but he's averaging like 20 to 24 points a game. He's really, evolving his game. I was going to say devolving. That was last year, of course, but evolving his game. And he's shooting with more confidence this year than ever. So Scotty Barnes is definitely taking it to that next step. This is that sophomore jump we wanted to see. Bam Adebayo, you touched on it there. He's being more aggressive on the offensive end. And of course, defense, like you mentioned, he can guard 1 through 5. So he's always been that two-way player. Kristaps Porzingis here, as like you talked about, he was brought in to be that third and fourth star. But the difference, I guess I'll say this. Coming into the season, we had high expectations for the Celtics, but I just think the additions of Drew Holiday and Kristaps have been better than we would expected. They fit
yeah,
perfectly. Usually there's a gel period. There hasn't been for the Boston Celtics. They're 11-3, and Kristaps is averaging over 20, shooting like 45% from three. Absolutely insane start from the year from Kristaps. He's exactly what they need to space the floor and give the other stars room to operate. But the only difference here is you have LaMelo, which after last night when he dropped Drew Holiday, I contemplated putting him in this list. Um, and of course, I had that crazy game with the Bucks. But I have Miles Turner. That's the only difference in our list here. Oh, well, I guess, yes, Trae Young as well. But Miles Turner, to me, he's the defensive anchor of this Indiana Pacers team. And I know, how can he be a defensive anchor of a team that is the bottom 10 defense in points per game? In my opinion, when you look at the on-off numbers for Miles Turner, and I know I don't typically go into the advanced stats, but the on-off numbers when he's on the court compared to when he's off on the defensive side of the ball are crazy. So Miles Turner is a big reason, let's not forget, why this team is where they are. And I just think the Pacers playing at the level they are deserve 2 All-Stars. And that's really what it comes down to. And maybe it's just my fandom for Miles Turner. But do you have any honorable mentions? I know you can argue a guy like Damian Lillard or Paolo
yep.
Banchero, or
Oh, wow.
maybe even a guy like Cam Thomas.
You actually named the first 2 players you named were actually contemplated on being in my list. I really wanted to get Paolo in there, but I couldn't. I just was looking at who I had, and I didn't really, the 3 guys I have ahead of him in position wise are all playing. I think Scotty's stats are pretty similar, but everybody else had better stats, and I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to show Scotty Barnes some love because I always slander Scotty Barnes. And, same thing about Dame. I just felt like, Dame, I feel like Dame is one of those players midseason. He will be on this list. There probably won't be any doubt about it. But at the moment, I just felt like Trae Young, given his situation, the Hawks didn't go into the season with any great expectations. And I feel like Trae Young always does what he does, which is a solid 23 to 24 points a game with about 11 to 12 assists. And people just kind of don't blink about it.
Right.
So I just wanted to show him a little bit of love. I'm a Trae Young hater, but I just had to show him a little bit of love right there.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, again, some of these players might not be here. Like Jaylen Brown, you can argue should have been on this list because he's been relatively healthy and he's still averaging Jaylen Brown stats. To me, though, again, I think Jaylen Brown will be on my all-star ballot come mid-season mark, come February. However, right now, it's the perfect opportunity to show other people love. Obviously, we don't know if Tyrese Maxey is going to continue to play at this pace at the mid-season mark. So that would be probably Jaylen Brown's spot. But we touched on all the honorable mentions there. I guess my last question here is if Cam Thomas didn't get hurt, would you have put him in your All-Star bench?
Oh man, I stats wise, I think what
Because he
he's
was
averaging like
averaging like
30.
26 points a game.
Yeah, stats wise, it's like wow, like that's crazy. And I guess for the sake of it being early season all star ballots, like early season based on how players are playing right now, he might have gotten a spot. But still, even then, I guess it still would have, because when you think of the Cam Thomas name, you're not thinking of one of these all star type of names, even though it's like,
Right.
you know, obviously we aren't casuals. We know Cam Thomas and he's a certified hooper. But I mean, even when you watch like certain Nets games, you could tell like that's what he's really in for. He's in to score. Don't
Right.
worry about defense. Don't when you get the ball, do not pass the ball. He doesn't look to pass ever. This is
It
a
might be
one
worse than
way.
Michael Porter.
Yeah, yeah. Except if Michael Porter could dribble and create his own shot to an even greater extent, that's what Cam Thomas is. And it his stats say like his 26 points a game say all star, but his I guess when you watch him, it doesn't really say all star player. I guess when you think about like some of these guys are two ways or very elite at more than one thing
Right.
on offense, and I don't know. Cam Thomas is very elite at scoring, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. But moving over to the Western Conference, I'm going to have you start off with your. Oh, I guess I'm going to have mine. Excuse me there. But I'm going to start with my starters. My starting backcourt is going to be SGA. To me, you could argue Steph Curry, of course, after his amazing return last night. The big difference between SGA and Steph for me, at least the 15 games into the season, is that there is a 3-game win difference between the two teams, both similar stats. And of course, Shea is mirroring his stats and success from last season. Of course, he's continuing this breakout. And of course, Luka. There's not much to say. Of course, he's a top 3, top 4 player in the world, in my opinion. But do you have any differences here in your West Court or Western Conference backcourt, if I can talk?
Yeah, I have just one minor difference. I have Shea as well. You mentioned Shea. He's you could argue he's a top 5 player in the league right now. The Thunder on off to an
10-7.
unbelievable start. The expectations for the Thunder, I think even after the play in last year, you were like, oh, there are probably teams that are going to be above them, and they've along with Chet, they've taken that off. And really shown everybody what they can do. But I have Anthony Edwards next to Shea. Anthony Edwards, this is somebody who, he's come in and he's really demanded and leaded this Timberwolves team this year. This is a team that they were the 8 seed last year. I'm sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
and lost in 5. And there are 5 tough games for the Denver
Yes.
Nuggets last year. Anthony Edwards. Obviously, he gets a lot of offseason hype, especially when he goes and plays with Team USA. So this is somebody who's carried that summer success that he had over into the league, and he's really, I don't want to say taking it by storm because I think everybody kind of felt this brewing, but he's really taken his game to another level this year.
Yeah, and I think honestly, you'll see here in a moment here, as far as where Luka is in Bakari's lineup. I guess it just depends on how you classify certain players. But in the age of positionless basketball, I'm sure the NBA will find another way to add all of these players to the starting lineup. But my starting 5, we have Jokic, of course, maybe the best player in basketball. If he's not 1, he's 2, carrying that Denver Nuggets team despite no Jamal Murray. Kevin Durant, I mean, he's been carrying that Suns team without Devin Booker. Devin Booker's a guy I wanted to throw on my bench so bad just because when he has played, he's been dominant. But again, due to games played, I really just had Kevin Durant on my list and no Devin Booker. So the only Phoenix Sun is Kevin Durant is the point I'm getting at. And the King, LeBron James, a guy that's shooting a career high in efficiency across the board at 400 years old. LeBron James continues to I guess, amaze us and I guess continues to improve at the age of 39. But what is your front court in the Western Conference?
Yeah, so I have the same front court except for Luka is my 3. Like you mentioned, this is one of those things where it's like, how do you classify these positions of these players? Because I mean, once upon a time, Shea was a 2, Ant was a 3, and Luka was a 1. Luka was a 2. He's been all around.
Right.
So have most of these guys except for maybe Jokic. But I have Luka at my 3. I have you mentioned Kevin Durant and Jokic. Kevin Durant, like you said, this is the most consistent player on Phoenix right now, and it's not bad when Kevin Durant is your most consistent player. That's
Right.
for sure. Jokic, like you said, he is leading this Denver team, who is Jamal Murray list for the month of November at least. And he's still putting up his stats, doing everything they, to keep them afloat in the West, keep them at the top of the Western Conference, I should say. And like I said, I put Luka there. Luka, the Dallas Mavericks, I think they started off better than a lot of people anticipated. Those offseason acquisitions and, a summer of letting Kyrie, I know Kyrie's been hurt and hasn't played every game, but a summer of letting Kyrie and Luka kind of gel more seems to have been very beneficial for this Dallas Mavericks team.
Kyrie was such a close, and I don't want to spoil it because I already spoiled Devin Booker, but Kyrie was so close to being on my bench unit, but I couldn't let my fandom get in the way. But we have a lot of young talent on this screen here, whether if these guys are in their prime or if they're, just finding their way, like Anthony Edwards. Of course, Anthony Edwards has been great, but he's not in his prime yet. And you can maybe argue that same thing for Shea. I think Luka's already in his prime. And same with Jokic. However, we still have guys like Kevin Durant and LeBron on this list. And it goes, the longevity of these two is just amazing. And it's like, I feel like we're taking it for advantage or taking advantage of it, however you want to put it, because it's like every single year we know these guys are going to be in this position. But at the same time, it's like I'm watching these guys. I see their excellence on the court. I just feel like even doing that, I feel like we're taking this for advantage with how great they've been for so long. I'll let you kick it off here with your bench unit to your backcourt and I guess your wings.
Yeah, so I have Steph Curry come in, De'Aaron Fox is my two guards off the bench, as well as Paul George throwing a wing right there. Steph Curry, obviously, like you said, you could have made the argument he could have been starting. He did miss a couple of games, and the Warriors have been I think they were on a losing streak up until, I think, last night, I believe, or a couple of nights ago. And Steph Curry, he has been the absolute driving force of this team. Klay Thompson has obviously been struggling, and they didn't have a 20-point per game score, another 20 player to score 20 points in a game other than Steph Curry until a couple of nights ago when their rookie did it. So that's obviously saying something about the state of this Warriors team right now. We'll see if they can get that fixed. De'Aaron Fox, he did miss a couple of games. When I put his name in there, he had played 6 out of the 11. But he was also averaging like 30 points a game.
Right.
So it was kind of like he played a game over, he was played about half the games. And De'Aaron Fox, as well as, I'm not going to get too far into it, but as well as some other players on this team are really playing at a high level, as well as this Kings team as a whole. And Paul George, same thing with Paul George. He's really started off the year in his bully mode this year. I believe he said that on his own podcast. Paul George, the stats won't reflect the record. He has been playing really well. They've won their last 2 with James Harden, but he was definitely the number one player. I guess that's kind of crazy to say when you have Kawhi on your team, but he was definitely the number one player before that trade, and he was playing like it too.
But yeah, I mean, you touched on it there. It's crazy to say that a team that has Kawhi Leonard, yet he's not the best player on the team so far this season. He's still kind of in vacation mode, or at least the load manage mode on the court, though, if that makes any sense. Kawhi Leonard, we're saying. Of course, we have the same backcourt on the bench here in the Western Conference. The only difference is that I have Ant here instead of De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox for me is, at the time that I put the list together, I think it was Sunday or Saturday even, he just didn't play at least half his team's games. And that was really my only criteria, was that you had to play at least half of your team's games. De'Aaron Fox, though, he's been amazing. But then, of course, Paul George, like we mentioned, best player on the Clippers, and Steph Curry. Last night, the Splash Bros had 52 points against the Rockets. And this team is like 7-5 when Curry plays, but the on-off numbers are absolutely insane. Draymond Green, stop putting people in headlocks. But the front court on the bench, the front court in the Western Conference on the bench for you, who are the 4 players for that?
Yeah, so I started off with Domantas Sabonis. There's a crazy stat going on. Like the last 8 games they've played, he's averaging like 26, 13, and 9 or something crazy like that. Like I mentioned with De'Aaron Fox, these guys are really, really, really playing at a high level. And sometimes you kind of get overlooked because, the Kings are high pace, and you kind of there are certain teams you kind of just feel like you don't pay attention to. But these 2 players, they're probably going to be right back in the All-Star game just like they were last year. Going to the right side, Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Anthony Davis, he's been healthy this year. He's definitely played LeBron has been on another level this year. Obviously, like you mentioned, especially with the efficiency. I don't know how many people watched that Rockets game, but he was very great in that game. But
Yes.
Anthony Davis as well. Anthony Davis has been the anchor on this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. He's playing like Anthony Davis. He's playing like he wants to play every game this season. I think he's only missed one game or so. But this is what we love to see from Anthony Davis in the Lakers uniform. And I threw in Chet Holmgren here. I wanted to show some love to Chet because Chet has been, I think he's averaging like, what is it, like 19, 10, and 5 or something like that.
Absolutely insane.
Uh, yeah,
3 game winner too recently.
yeah, exactly. Versus the Golden State Warriors, and I think he's averaging like 2 blocks as well. Chet has come into the league, and he's already a top 5. You could argue probably even a top 3 big man. I know there's like guys like Cat and some other guys out there, but Chet has really made an immediate difference for this Thunder team. And his confidence definitely wasn't overhyped. He is the perfect pick and roll partner, perfect big to pair with a player like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Absolutely. But me, on the flip side, I also have Domantas Sabonis and Anthony Davis. You touched on it there. Domantas Sabonis has been on a crazy tear, especially with the absence of De'Aaron Fox. Now that the two are back, they're playing at an even higher level, and the Kings look like they're for real, and they're going to be back into playoff contention. For Anthony Davis, he was the last player I actually put on this list for the simple fact that his counting stats are there, and he's still, defensively there. I think he's averaging like three blocks a game, which is absolutely insane. But the other two guys might come in question. But again, it's first month into the season. I want to show some love to some guys that might not get this, this nod when it comes to the February time. But Rudy Gobert, the Depoy Rudy Gobert version is back as this whole team, this team as a whole, where Cat is more aggressive. We've seen a different version of Cat this year. I was never behind the Anthony Edwards hype train until like a year and a half ago, but you were on it back when he was at like Georgia. So I wanted to show you your flowers there, but Anthony Edwards is turning into the next Michael Jordan. He has pieces around him like Cat and Jaden McDaniels, but the defense is ultimately led by Rudy Gobert, where if you look at all of his advanced stats, Rudy Gobert is on top of the league by far. It kind of mirrors what it looked like when he was the defensive player of the year. Of course, his head might not feel the greatest right now, but Alperen Sengun, this is a guy that's, to me, one of my favorite centers to watch. He's really just like a mini Jokic, but he's, I think when Ime Udoka went there, the first couple games of the season, he was letting Jalen Green and the other young stars kind of run the show. But then he quickly realized the best player on this team is not Jalen Green. It's not Jabari Smith and whoever else they have on that team. It's not Amen Thompson. It's Alperen Sengun. So they've switched their offense to run just like the Denver Nuggets, where it's Alperen Sengun has the ball. Sometimes he brings it up, and then the offense revolves around him. And he's just such a great playmaker and just great basketball mind that this team has been successful with that system. So I just wanted to show some love to Alp because the Rockets, they definitely deserve some credit here. But some honorable mentions, you have guys like Dillon Brooks. Do you have Dillon Brooks as an honorable mention?
No.
I was just joking. But do you have any other honorable mentions here for the Western Conference? There's, of course, some other guys we could have thrown in there. For me, again, De'Aaron Fox, but it was the games played factor. But some other guys that maybe you wanted to throw in here. Maybe does Victor Wembanyama get some love for you?
No, I'm playing. Vic didn't get any. I didn't really consider Vic because I was like, well, if I consider Vic, like, then I definitely have to have Chet in here. And I was considering Chet. Obviously the comparisons between those two. I like you mentioned earlier, Devin Booker. I kind of wanted to throw him in here somewhere, but it was just kind of tough given he's playing every other night. It feels like, but when he does play, he's average. He's like 26, 8, and 9. Crazy stats. I really do want to see Brad Beal play for the Suns, though. Side note, it's a long time coming to see that Suns big three go out. But I really wanted to see them to see them play at some point. But other than like Devin Booker for the Western Conference, I can't remember if I had any like, oh man, I really wanted to put this guy in here. I think my Western Conference, unlike the East, was pretty straightforward. For the East, I forgot to mention, I also thought about Cade Cunningham. I know they're like 2-13, but he is also playing pretty well.
Yes.
So a lot of guys like
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, another guy's like Kyrie Irving for me, but the other guards I have on this list are just playing too well for me to include Kyrie on this list. But ultimately, before we get out of here, I just want to get your overall thoughts on the Cavaliers this season. There's no way I could have invited you on the podcast and not had you give your thoughts about the Cavs to this point in the season. The 21st ranked offense, the 19th ranked defense, which we were number one last year. And of course, we're 7-6, eighth in the Eastern Conference. Donovan Mitchell's currently dealing with a hamstring injury. But I mean, he's dealing with an injury, but we're still on a 3-game win streak. I guess I'll ask you this. Given that this 3-game win streak without Donovan Mitchell, do you think that this is the turning point for us? Do you think we've kind of figured something out? We had a big win against the Nuggets the other night. Do you think we can, I guess that's the turning point for us, or do you think this season is kind of just going to keep going at the pace that it is and we're going to be a 500 team?
I think we figure something out for when Donovan Mitchell doesn't play, because Darius Garland is naturally more of a playmaker. He can create his own shot and he can keep others involved. And that's the dangerous thing about the team right now is that, we have Craig Porter come off the bench and score 21 points the 2 nights ago when we played the Nuggets. I'm sorry. And, the team just had the ball was moving. Obviously, that comes when your starting point guard does a starting point guard duties. When Donovan Mitchell plays and Darius Garland doesn't, it's more of a sit back and watch Donovan Mitchell score 30 points or at least put up 30 shots, which for the most part it seems to work because he's efficient enough when it does that, but he doesn't really keep others involved. So players like Evan Mobley and Jared Allen aren't able to get as many touches on offense, and when they do, they're kind of forcing up shots. It kind of leaves guys like Max Strus and George Niang out of position and can kind of create inconsistencies there. So I think they need to figure out how they're going to balance playmaking, and it might be on Donovan to say, hey, I'm going to take 5 less shots, or I'm going to average 5 less points, and I'm going to up my assist total by 2 to 3 and keep everybody involved. That'll make a more dangerous backcourt. That'll make a more dynamic Cavs team. And as far as the defensive issues have to go, I hate to say it, but I think the defensive issues are just a result of the team being soft.
Yes.
I think, teams might have saw a blueprint for, how to, analyze the Cavs last year in the playoffs, when the Knicks obviously were very physical with us, and it's kind of carried over into this season. Teams are figuring out if you just kind of bump into the chest of Evan Mobley or Jared Allen, not much is going to happen. You're going to get it easy.
They're not going to fight back.
Exactly. So, as far as defense goes, I think the guys just need to toughen up. As crazy as it sounds, when you watch the Cavs game, you will know what we're talking about when we say toughen up. And offensive wise, they need to balance between playmaking for others and also, letting Donovan Mitchell be Donovan Mitchell.
Absolutely. It's definitely more on his shoulders. But if you want to hear my thoughts about it, shameless plug, check out last Tuesday's video. We talked about the Cavs in depth, but you touched on basically a lot of the great points, and you even added some there. So, of course, we had to get your thoughts about the Cavs. But that is going to do it for today's show. Again, we ran through our Eastern Conference and Western Conference 1-month NBA All-Star ballots. But any last thoughts before we get out of here? We're on the road to 5K. I don't know if you've seen the channel as of late, but we're like 500 subs away from that next big milestone. But I guess any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, 5K. It feels like what 3 weeks ago when I was doing it, we were trying to get to 2K or 1K?
Yes, 2K.
One of those, and we're already talking about 5K. The growth and explosion of this page it makes me very happy for you, seeing how much work you put in behind the scenes, how dedicated you are to this. Definitely deserving, and we couldn't be any more grateful for the viewers of this pod, and about 500 away from 5K. Let's get it done.
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't have been done without you. Of course, that was the most pivotal time of the podcast, was the beginning of it. Right now, we're just YouTube is loving the page, so they're pushing it out there just a little bit more. But like Bakari mentioned, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, help us get to that next big milestone. Because if we get big enough, we might just extend the shows to more shows a week. And of course, we can all quit our day jobs. But without further ado, that's going to do it for today's show. We'll see you guys tomorrow for some fantasy football. On Thursday, Amir will be back on the show for some contenders and pretenders, as well as our Week 12 predictions. But until then, stay happy, stay healthy, get out of here.